All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Journey of the Soul. So this is our second lesson, and today's lesson addresses a topic that is very special, very meaningful, very important, and I think that many of us have wondered about the areas of conversation that we're focusing on tonight. And what's amazing is that Judaism, our tradition, has a lot of wisdom on this topic, and the topic is soul connection. Before we get to the topic, let me segue by quickly recapping what we spoke about last week. So last week, we spoke about life and death, but more importantly, we spoke about what life really is. And we explained that life is a composite, at least the life that we know that we are familiar with is a composite of body and soul. However, although it's a team, although it takes two, it takes body and soul to produce the life as we know it, physical life in this world. Although that is the case, that there are two partners, there's a primary partner and what we might call a secondary partner. In other words, might say in Hebrew language, there's ikar and tafel, primary and secondary. And what is primary to life is the soul. The body, although it is a key element, obviously, the body is but the spacesuit, the analogy we gave last week, and or the glove that the soul wears, as it were, that the soul is garbed in order to be effective, in order to create change, to make an impact in this world. The example I gave about an astronaut is if you take a human being and you launch them into outer space, they will not be able to survive in that environment because a human cannot survive in outer space. The only survival is when the astronaut is housed inside a spacesuit, then the human can operate and can do space research, etc. And the same thing is true with the soul. A soul cannot operate in this physical environment. A soul and the physical world are just, it's a collision of two realities. And so the soul needs to be garbed in a physical world so that it can exist in a physical body, so that it can exist in a physical world, because physical is compatible with physical. And yet, even as the soul enlivens the body, we know what is primary and what is secondary. And what's primary is the soul. So the soul is life. The body is what is enlivened by the soul. Two very different realities. The soul is life. It gives life to the body. The body, by its own nature, is of the earth. In other words, it's not animated. It doesn't have consciousness on its own. The body itself does not have consciousness, does not have animation, does not have vitality. It is not alive in the traditional sense. It is enlivened when a soul is infused and is embodied, as it were, inside of it. And we explained last week what life is. And therefore, the conclusion of last week's conversation was that when we think about life and we think about mortality or the end of life, it's important to recognize that the concept of an end is only applicable to a body, not to a soul. Souls don't end. Souls can't end. If a soul is alive, if a soul is life, then the soul lives and the soul continues to live, albeit in a different form. A body, yes, for a certain amount of time is enlivened, and then at a certain point in time, the soul is no longer operating inside of it. So there can be mortality and some sort of limitation, right? A finite limitation to the life, to the life experience of the body, but not to the soul, which therefore directly raises the question that we're going to address today. If it's true, and we believe it's true, that the soul lives on, well, then the big question today is, are we still connected? Are they connected with us? Are we connected with them? Can we communicate with them? Can they communicate with us? In other words, what is the nature? If the position is, if conceptually, and we don't, but if theoretically, the Jewish position was that death marks the end, it's all over, well, then the question of can we remain connected doesn't begin, because if it's over, if it's the end, then what are you connecting with? Then what are you continuing with if it's over? But since Judaism believes, and this is true throughout Jewish literature, from Torah through Talmud, through halacha, Jewish law, through Kabbalah, Jewish mystical thought, since Judaism believes that the soul's life does continue, well, now we have a good question. Because if the soul continues to live, a soul that was in a body that we knew and loved, well, now that the soul is no longer infused or housed by that body, can we remain connected? Do we remain connected? What is the nature of that connection between those who are still alive in the sense that souls are in the body in this world, with souls that are no longer in bodies in this world? And that is the question that we're addressing tonight. So in order to get a clear and what I believe is a really comprehensive understanding of the soul's cross-border connection, as it were, we'll need to look at 4 important stages, or let's maybe call them 4 experiences that take place when a loved one passes away. And you can think of them as stages or timelines or experiences or states of being. But it's important to understand that we're going to divide tonight's conversation into 4 parts. Number 1, we're going to speak about the immediate moment of passing and what happens at that moment. And what happens with the soul, what happens with the body, but what's the experience at the moment of passing? That's point number 1, or that stage or experience number 1. The next step, the next stage, the next experience we're going to look at is the transition of the soul away from the body, and how that experience unfolds. The third stage is the experience of the body after the soul separates from the body. What is the body experiencing? And the fourth and final stage or experience we're going to look at is after a loved one is laid to rest, what is the experience like, and what is the connection like between loved ones and those who have departed. So we're going to look at these 4 experiences, and I think that they're going to open up our eyes in a big way into the Jewish perspective on, again, life, death, and the afterlife, but really it's about soul connections. That's tonight's topic. So I want to begin by looking at stage number 1, the initial moment of passing. And we'll ask a simple question: what happens at the moment of a person's passing? Simple question, like what happens? And the answer is, likewise, a fairly straightforward answer. If life, as we said last week, and I recapped already tonight, if life, again, the life as we know it, right? The life that we traditionally call life, human physical life, is a composite of soul and body, or is a shidduch, as it were, a match of soul and a body, of life enlivening a body, well, then the moment of passing is when there is an uncoupling of soul from body. When the soul, instead of animating and infusing the body with vitality, animation, and consciousness, it's when the soul uncouples, when the soul departs, as it were, from the body. Again, it doesn't mean that the soul disappears. The soul does not go anywhere in the sense that it ends, but it is at that point that it is uncoupled. But we need to look at this on a much deeper level, because although we typically talk about a soul and a body, which implies that there's a single unit called soul and a single unit called body, there's much more than meets the eye. There may be a single unit called body, but there's not a single unit called soul, because Kabbalah teaches us that every soul is comprised of 5 dimensions. Kamisha Shemais Nikra La. It says in the mystical text, she is referred to by 5 names. She, referring to the soul, is referred to by 5 names. You may be familiar with this: Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. It's important to know this. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. And I could translate them, but the truth is, it's just going to be an English word. Might as well explain what these 5 dimensions are, and then I'll let you write down whatever words you want to translate it. Because Nefesh translates as soul, Ruach is spirit, Neshama is soul again. It's not English. A translation of one word is arbitrary and ineffective to convey what these are. So let me explain. And the reason why we're doing this, just so we don't lose the plot, the reason why I'm explaining the 5 layers of the soul is because Kabbalah teaches us that after a soul uncouples from a body, the different dimensions of the soul go to different places. So it's important, and reside in different spaces. It's important to understand the different layers of the soul, what they're about, and therefore where they find themselves after uncoupling from the body. So here we go. Number 1, nefesh. Let's define it first before we talk about what happens, what's the fate of the nefesh. Let's talk about nefesh. The lowest dimension of the soul, nefesh, can be thought of as the very basic life slash vitalizing slash animating force of the soul. If you want to think about the soul as a battery pack, so the juice of the soul, the fact that the soul enlivens the body on a very basic level, that is the role of nefesh. Nefesh provides biological or physiological life, basic life. So I'm going to give you an example, and this is going to be a basic example, right? Imagine you have, when you were a kid or you bought your kid, imagine you have a toy robot, a little robot. And, you know, when I was a kid and they had the commercials back in the 80s, maybe early 90s, they always had a caveat at the end. You know what the caveat was? Batteries not included, right? If you buy the toy, you should know batteries not included. Don't get your hopes up. Keep a stockpile of batteries. You're going to need them. So now imagine you're the kid. You open up the packaging. You're so excited. You get your robot. And how did you find out about the robot? I don't know. You were watching a show and the commercial came on and they marketed, right? They marketed to the kids. The robot is amazing. And now you open it up and you're like, oh no, we need batteries. And no, yes, you ask your mom, she's got the batteries. You pull them out of the package, you pop it in, and now the robot comes to life. Right? You press maybe there's a button that you press or a switch that you toggle to turn it on, and suddenly, right? That's, I'm not going to do a robot dance, although we could break this out into a whole thing. But right, suddenly the robot comes to life and it's moving and it's whirring and it's making sounds and it's flashing. It is alive. Before that, it was just a hunk of probably plastic, maybe some metal if you're lucky, if it's a higher end robot, right? Probably made overseas. It's just it's not doing anything. It's not alive. You put a battery in, you turn it on, it's alive. That's what the nefesh is. Nefesh is the basic battery pack-esque dimension of the soul. It's giving the body life. Ruach, next level. So now you have a live body, but no personality, no feelings. Because human beings are not just robots. We feel. That's the role of Ruach. Ruach gives us our emotional life. It's the realm of emotions. It's the realm of personality. It's the realm of feelings and personality and identity, who you are. Your character is your Ruach. You know, Ruach, another word for Ruach is spirit. Spirit. It's your spirit. Right? You see someone, say, wow, there's such a, you talk about a person's spirit. They walk in a room, oh, this person has a certain type of spirit. Certain, maybe people call it an aura or whatever. That the Ruach is your personality. So it's one thing to be biologically alive. That's nefesh. But it's another thing to possess character, emotions, feelings, personality. Okay. We move on. Neshama. Now you're thinking, okay, so there's physical, there's biological life. There's even emotional personality. What else is there? But wait, there's more. Neshama, intelligence. Wait, we forgot about intelligence. Neshama is the step up. Step up is intelligence. A human being also has a world of intellect, intelligence. How you think, what you think, the way you think, everyone thinks differently, the Talmud says. Just like no two faces are alike, with all due respect to identical twins, this is what the Talmud says. Just like no two faces are alike, likewise, no two people's minds are alike. Ein deosehen shavos. No two people think the same way. Put the same information. We can have a fact, we can have a situation play out. 10 people in a room or whatever it is, and 10 different perspectives. 10, it's integrated, or why am I getting complicated? The same class, the same lesson, the same sources, the same teachings. We're going to study Zohar tonight. We're going to study Gemara, Talmud. We're going to study a lot of things. And I can guarantee you, everyone in this room will walk away learning something else. And that's not a flaw, it's a feature. No two minds are alike. What makes your mind your mind? The soul. Neshama, that's the neshama. Nefesh, biological life. It's the battery pack. It's just energy. It's It's alive. Ruach is personality, character, emotional disposition. Neshama, intelligence, not just what you know, but how you think, your perception, your intellectual capacity. That's neshama. So now you have a human being with ideas and feelings and personality and is alive. You got nefesh, ruach, neshama. In Kabbalah, in case you want to sound very knowledgeable in Kabbalah, next time you meet a rabbi, maybe a Chabad rabbi or a Kabbalist, you throw out the acronym Naran, right? Non resh, nefesh, ruach, neshama, Naran. Like, Naran. Person knows Naran. Welcome to the secret club of mystics. That's Naran. And then there's Chai Yechida. Those are the super conscious levels of the soul. That's like faith, where faith comes from. Or where, Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh is self-sacrifice. The ability that a person has to give up their life for their beliefs. Wow. I mean, that's dedication. Imagine a person willing to surrender their life for what they believe in. That doesn't make sense. That's not logical. Live another day. So what? The fellow says, imagine in 1492, imagine I said, you have to kiss the cross, bow down, or else that's it. A person might say, it's the big deal. It's the big deal. I'll pretend whatever. And then and some people did that, and not a judgment. But why would someone say, no, that's it. I'm not giving up my faith? Because it's inside. It's inside. A person says, I cannot be inauthentic to who I am. It's my core. It's my yechida. That's the highest level. The yechida is the highest level. So chai and yechida. So those are chaya. Yeah, life. Right? Nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. Yeah.
Would you say the neshama was the Chacham and
those are this,
and then the ruach would be the seven emotional influence?
You could roughly. So again, starting from the bottom up, if we're building out the human being, so we start off with the body. Okay, but the body's not alive. It's like the toy when you take it out of the package without any batteries. It's not alive. It's ready to be alive, but it's not actually alive. So you start off with the robot, okay, as it were, the body. So nefesh, or think about it in layers. Nefesh gives it light, just like it's vibrating now. Great. Then you give it a personality. Then you give it intelligence. Then you give it faith. Then you give it a spiritual core. Now we're talking. Nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. I mean, we could talk about this in relationships also. Compatibility in relationships. I mean, if you want to talk about relationship compatibility, am I attracted to them? Nefesh, on a physical level. Am I emotionally attracted to them? Do I like their personality? Ruach. Do we have the same ideas? Neshama. What about the same spiritual truths, the spiritual foundations? Chaya Yechida, we'll just lump them together. So in compatibility, like relationship compatibility, in every area you have these 4 or 5 dimensions play itself out. Okay, I know I'm glossing over the top 2, Chaya Yechida, because the truth is, it's not really relevant to the conversation tonight. And honestly, if we were to break everything down, we could do a class on the 5 layers of the soul. But that's not really what tonight's class is about. Tonight's class is about, well, what happens next? And so here's what's important. Here's what Kabbalah says. Kabbalah says that the nefesh remains with the body. The ruach goes to Gan Eden HaTachton, lower Gan Eden. And neshama goes to Gan Eden HaElyon, upper Gan Eden. And I'll repeat that. The higher levels of soul we're not going to talk about. The 2 higher levels, let's just leave that for another conversation, another time. The 3 lower dimensions, Naran, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, the Nefesh, the basic, the physiological soul, as it were, that remains with the body. That was always about the body. It wasn't about anything beyond. It wasn't about personality. It wasn't about any intelligence. It was about the body. It remains with the body forever. It remains with the body. So wherever the body is, that's where the Nefesh remains eternally. Ruach resides in lower Gan Eden. Neshama resides in upper Gan Eden. Now, you may be wondering, well, where are these located? Here's what's very important to know. If I were to use my hands, because it's the only thing I have, or I don't have really anything else to use. If I were to use my hands and say like this, okay, so your nefesh is here, right? In the earth, right, with the body. Ruach is in lower Gan Eden, and neshama is up. If I did that, 1, 2, 3, you would get the impression that Gan Eden was here, or Gan Eden was there, and that's not the case. Where's Gan Eden? It's right here. In other words, when we think of spiritual realms, and we talk about higher realms, so because the word higher is used, Higher, because we use the term higher or lower, spiritual or physical, so automatically it creates, even if it's unintentional, it creates the impression that spiritual realms are physically higher than physical realms. As if we got into a rocket ship and went up with whoever it is to outer space, we would bump into Gan Eden on the way, or if we kept on going, finally we would hit Gan Eden. And that could not be any further from the truth. In fact, and for example, just one text in the book of Tanya, if you study Tanya a little bit, multiple times the author, the founder of Chabad, emphasizes that when we talk about higher and lower, it is not spatial construct, it is not physical direction, it is not something that you can, it's not a tangible description, it is simply a description of that which is more overtly spiritual or less overtly spiritual. That which is more overtly spiritual, we say higher. That which is less overtly spiritual, we say lower. In other words, that which is more consciously spiritual, higher, less consciously spiritual, lower. Earth is lower, heaven is higher, Gan Eden is higher. Not that it's physically higher, it's closer in not proximity, physical proximity, it's closer in consciousness to source than is Earth. Does that make sense? Okay. So the nefesh resides with the body, ruach in lower Gan Eden, neshama in higher Gan Eden. So we'll hold on. Where are they? Different spaces, different. It's all right here. It's all right here. You know, it says that Adam and Eve lived in Gan Eden. Where was it? It was also right here. It wasn't a different space. It's the same space, a different consciousness, a different awareness. More awareness of God means you're in a higher realm. You're not actually stepping upstairs. You're not actually getting to an elevator. You're in a state of higher consciousness. You can be right over here. Okay, I've done a lot of talking. I just want to make sure that this is all making sense so far. Yes? Any questions so far? Okay, this is like some of the background. Now, take a look at text 1a. I think I'm gonna do the readings tonight because I do want to throw in a lot of commentary. There's a lot of need for commentary in these texts. And so let's just jump in with this. Text 1a. Pull this up just in case anyone needs it. By the way, there's a lot of text. My goal is to get through as absolutely much that we can. And to not leave anything behind. Here we go. Now, I got to give you a background on this letter. This is a letter that the author of the founder of Chabad, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, wrote to the students of Rabbi Menachem Mendel Haraducker. So let me break this down very quickly, some background. So the founder of the Hasidic movement was the Baal Shem Tov. His primary student was the Maggid of Mizrich. The Maggid of Mizrich had multiple students who were Hasidic masters, became Hasidic masters in their own right. Rabbi Levi Siverditsha, Rabbi Zoshev Anipoli, etc. I can keep on going. He had dozens of students, and all which started their own dynasties, etc. The Alter Rebbe was the youngest. The founder of Chabad was the youngest, and he had a senior colleague, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Haraducker, who they all lived in Russia or that part of the world, Eastern Europe, Russia. And at a certain point in time, this elder colleague, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Haraducker, moved to Israel, and many of his students followed him. And at some point later in time, years later or whatever it was, he passed away. And so the Alter Rebbe wrote, the founder of Chabad, he wrote a letter of condolences to the students of his former colleague who had passed away. And here's what the letter reads. As is known, the life of a tzaddik, righteous person, is not physical, but spiritual. It consists of faith, reverence, and love for God. During the tzaddik's lifetime on earth, these three attributes that belong to the soul dimension of Ruach are constrained within their container and garb, namely the nefesh that is bound to the corporeal body. This imposes the restraints of physical space upon these attributes. As a result, all the tzaddik's disciples receive but a glow of these ruach attributes, a mere ray that is emitted beyond the container by means of the tzaddik's holy words and thoughts. The inability to receive directly from ruach is a revelatory handicap, and therefore our sages stated that it takes 40 years for students to fully plume the depths of their master's teachings. By contrast, after the tzaddik's passing, the nefesh separates from the ruach and remains in the grave, while the ruach and its three attributes rise to Gan Eden. Consequently, whoever is close to the tzaddik can receive directly from his ruach in Gan Eden, because the ruach is no longer restrained in a container or confined to a physical space. You guys see what he's saying here? It's actually like it's the right word. It like can give you the chills. What he's saying. More access, unconstrained access. Typically, you have to lift up the phone to make a phone call and connect with someone's personality. You want to talk to someone, right? It's not that you want to hear their voice. I mean, also, that's the nefesh level. You want them. There's a famous story. Alter Rebbe, the same author. He had his grandson in his lap. And he said to his grandson, "Where's Zayda? Where's grandfather?" It's a little kid. He pointed, Tzemach Tzedek, who would become the third Chabad. He pointed to his grandfather's face. No, that's Zayda's face. Zayda's arm. Zayda's arm. Like the kid, smart kid, he gets up, goes into the other room, and he starts screaming. And his grandfather comes running over and says, "Are you okay?" He says, "There's Zayda." Zayda is not the beard, is not the face, it's not the arm, it's the presence, it's the personality, it's the love. That's Zayda. It's the love. And that's Ruach. I mean, if you want to know someone's ideas, that's Neshama, but we're not even talking about Neshama. We're talking about personality. Who the person, you think about a loved one, who are they? That's their Ruach. That's their spirit. We even use it in English. What's a person's spirit like? Right? Talk about a person's spirit. And the Alter Rebbe is saying, as in a letter to the disciples of this great Rebbe, he's saying, you should know that based on our tradition, until now, to access your teacher's spirit, you had to go through the physical channels. You couldn't go straight and direct. You had to wait for a meeting, for a consultation, whatever it is, a spiritual. You had to listen to a teaching, whatever. Now you can access. Let's keep on going. There is now a straightforward path for the tzaddik's disciples to connect with the essence of their master's ruach, the faith, awe, and love with which the tzaddik serve God, which is his personality, and not merely these attributes outer glow that escape beyond their container. The disciples connect and receive commensurate to the degree of their loving connection and closeness to the tzaddik during his lifetime and after his death. This last line is stunning. For the transmission of all things spiritual is always by means of great love. And with that last line, he answers a question that I'm sure all of us have. Well, one second. I can appreciate, a person might say, I can acknowledge that as long as a person's ruach is tethered to their body, i.e., the ruach is almost operating through the nefesh, through the body, the ruach is almost locked down. You can't access it. You don't have all access to the ruach. Yeah, you want the ruach, you're going to have to go through, you have to pick up the phone. And then you can maybe access the ruach that way. And how much ruach? As much as leaks through a conversation, a verbal conversation. That's how much ruach you're going to get. And when the ruach is no longer inhibited by the body, it's on full display without any, it's not at all tempered, it's not at all limited, it's unlimited, unleashed, full display, and all access. And what's the obvious question that we all have? Okay, but what's the number? I knew how to get it before. And even though it was limited, but I knew how to access. How do I access now? What do I do? I can't pick up the phone. So how do I access? And the last line he answers, you know what the number is? It's the love that we have, that we maintain. That's the connection. That's the connection. There's the cord of love that we still have. The unending love that we have for our loved ones, that's the bond, that's the cord, that's literally the fiber cable, as it were, that connects us with our loved ones. How do you call? How do you connect? How do you interface? It's through the love that you have, that you maintain. Let's take a look at text 1b. The Rebbe writes a letter, our Rebbe writes a letter, 1983, and it reads like this. It is also a matter of common sense that whatever, oh, hold on one second. Put this up. It is also a matter of common sense that whatever the direct cause of the separation of the soul from the body, whether a fatal accident or fatal illness, etc., it could affect only any of the vital organs of the physical body, but could in no way affect the spiritual soul. A further point, which is also understandable, is that during the soul's lifetime on earth, in partnership with the body, the soul is necessarily handicapped in certain respects by the requirements of the body, such as eating and drinking, etc. Even a tzaddik, whose entire life is consecrated to Hashem, cannot escape the restraints of life in a material and physical environment. Consequently, when the time comes for the soul to return home, it is essentially a release for it, as it makes its ascent to a higher world, no longer restrained by a physical body and physical environment. Henceforth, the soul is free to enjoy the spiritual bliss of being near to Hashem in the fullest measure. Now, clearly, this letter, the focus, at least of this excerpt of this letter, is about the soul's experience vis-a-vis God and vis-a-vis its own spiritual, its full spiritual reality is now unleashed. It's no longer tethered. It no longer has to spend time eating, drinking, sleeping, etc. Now it can just be a soul. But I think text 1a, and that's like it's now closer to God. But that's tonight's class is about us and our relationship. Text 1a, I think, makes that point very powerful. And I probably should mention, even though text 1a was talking about a tzaddik's passing, it's true for everybody. Everybody has a ruach, and everyone's ruach is limited by their body. When they're alive, when the ruach is enclosed by the body, and everyone's ruach unenclosed by the body is now in a dynamic state and more accessible than before. But it requires the cords of love. It requires that type of unending, loving connection that continues that bond between loved ones. Let's kind of wrap up this section. So what we learned so far is about the soul's experience at the moment of passing. Right? I said tonight we're going to talk about 4 stages or experience: the moment of passing, the soul's transition, the body's transition, and what comes after all that. So we've talked about the first experience or the first stage. What happens at a person's passing? On a very basic level, the soul uncouples from the body. It was invested or enclosed by the body. Now it's uncoupled. On a more precise level, it depends which level of the soul. The lowest level of the soul, the nefesh, still remains not tethered by, but it remains in proximity to the body, ruach, Gan Eden, lower Gan Eden, neshama, upper Gan Eden, etc. And the main idea that I wish to convey in this first section is that, notwithstanding the fact that the ruach, for example, which is the spirit, the personality of our loved one, is no longer in a physical body, and we think, oh no, like the ruach is gone. On the contrary, it's not gone. It's more, what is? I mean, it's more unleashed. It's more, I don't know if that evokes the right feeling, but it's less tempered.
Untethered.
It's more, yeah, it's not tethered. Yeah, it's untethered. It's more accessible at any time, any place. You don't have to pick up the phone. It's the connection of love that keeps us bound. Now, let's continue.
It's like a spray, and when you and like an aerosol, it's free of the can.
Now, let's continue with the next stage. What's the next stage, or the second experience that we're going to speak about? And that is the moments after passing and the transition of the soul. So we start with a Zohar, which is text 2, which is powerful teaching. And, I mean, I think I don't know if it's the most, anyway, it's a teaching about the experience of the soul. And it's important, I think, that we understand this reality and understand it also in its context. The Zohar says, and just in case it's necessary to say, the Zohar is one of the primary works of Kabbalah, of Jewish mysticism. So the Zohar says, nothing is as hard for the soul as its separation from the body. and I want to spend a few moments speaking about this because it's a very bold statement. This is a very, very powerful statement, and it's a very bold statement because if you think about the experience of a soul, as we discussed it last week, coming into the body, that was traumatic. That was we had readings last week that talked about that. How a soul, when it's chosen for a body, the soul says, "I don't want to go." It says, "Not a chance, not happening." I mean, imagine, right? Imagine my kids are at a baseball game, right? Imagine the manager calls for the bullpen and says, "Hey, we need whoever it is for the bullpen, come out the pitch." Not happening. I don't want to go. I don't want to go into the field. The soul says no. And the soul is basically forced. Says this in Pirkei Avos, in the Mishnah. Against your will, you live. Against your will, you were born. It says that. Get there in a second. That's this. Against your will, you live. The soul doesn't want to be here. And then you can imagine the experience of the soul below in this world. Imagine you have a pure soul, a pure neshama. You want to say a neshama leh, make it sound even more pure. A neshama leh. And where does it find itself? Planet Earth. And what's in planet Earth? All sorts of things. And it's now stuck in a body. And the body is running after all sorts of mishagas. And everywhere the body goes, guess what? Guess what's with it? The soul. I mean, the body can't go on its own. It needs a nefesh. Certainly to make it move, it needs a nefesh. The ruach is pulled, neshama is pulled, and chay and yechida, they're also being pulled. And you can imagine how as the soul goes through its time on earth, there are moments in time in which the soul is probably very pained by the activities of the body, which I'm just a very kind way of saying our choices. And yet the Zohar says nothing is as painful for the soul as its separation from the body. Notwithstanding the trauma of going into a body or the trauma of spending time with that body as it navigates this planet, this world, this reality, this lifetime, notwithstanding all of that, the greatest difficulty for the soul is when it has to leave. Against your will, you die. Because as we said last week, well, there's two reasons for this. Might be more, but I'll share with you two ideas, which I'm sure maybe you're even thinking of right now. Number one, the first point is, despite their essential, inherent incompatibility, as soul is spiritual, body is physical, inherently it's like the ultimate odd couple, right? It's like that are stuck together. Despite all that, they spend time together and they get used to each other. And so the soul departing from the body is very difficult for the soul because the soul it's a familiar space to be in. That's point number one. Point number two, and this is what we talked about last week, is that the soul recognizes ultimately that the only space to do a mitzvah, yeah, you can be spiritual without a body, but to do a mitzvah, the only place to do a mitzvah is in a body. And so the soul can recognize and can feel the challenge of stepping away from that body and letting go of that. I mean, what do we call it? The spacesuit. And kind of, the final taking off of, I mean, think about almost like a tradition or what am I saying? Like final time you take off the suit. Imagine a firefighter or a police or whatever it is. The last time you take off the uniform and you hang it up. You hang it up, right? Or a chef, the last time you take the apron, you hang it up, and that's it, and you walk away. Is that not difficult? Something that you appreciate, something that you were able to do in that role, and you can't do in another role. A soul above cannot do a mitzvah. It's the spiritual experience is brighter. It's closer to Hashem. All of that is true. Everything we said last week and already tonight, all of that is true. Can't do a mitzvah without a body. Can't do a mitzvah without a body. You can be close to God without a body. You can't do a mitzvah, and there's something special about it. And it's hard to hang that up. It's hard to hang up the uniform. It's hard to say goodbye. It's painful for the soul. Painful. What does that feel like? I don't know. Painful. It's painful to say goodbye for the soul. Yeah.
It sounds like the Stockholm syndrome. That initially the soul doesn't want to come and it's forced to be joined with the body. And then after experiencing it for a whole life, it doesn't want to leave.
It comes to enjoy its captivity.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I once, by the way, just anecdotally, I once heard a podcast that argued that the Stockholm syndrome is a misnomer.
I was just gonna say that, the Stockholm syndrome.
No, the original story of people who were taken hostage in the bank over there in Stockholm, they had an affinity to they were upset at the police because the police were endangering their lives. And anyway, so there's a lot to say about that. But yeah, I don't know. This is outside of my field. But the concept is, I don't think necessarily, and I don't know how it works with Stockholm syndrome, but there's a very real reason. It's number one, it's familiar. And number two, well, maybe that's closer to that. But number two, there's even a spiritual reason, because we can only fulfill God's will by doing a mitzvah. We can only fulfill with the body. Soul without a body can't. Yeah.
When the soul departs, does it leave the animal part of the soul with the body?
So, okay, I'll repeat the question. Does it leave when the soul departs from the body? What about, is that the godly soul? Is that the animal soul? So the short of it is that the animal soul would almost be compatible with the level of nefesh that we're speaking about. Not that they're the same, not that it's synonymous,
Right.
but it would be akin to what we said about the nefesh. If the animal soul, or maybe even not, because if the animal soul was only providing a foil or resistance,
Right. That's what I'm
then
saying.
that is completely no longer needed at all.
Right, so
Maybe that or maybe that altogether just goes away. I mean, I think we're talking about the nefesh of the godly soul. Maybe the animal soul just has no purpose at all. At least the nefesh that was giving vitality, animation, energizing the body, for a good cause. I mean, it was on the, it was on the God squad, at least. The animal soul, also created by God, obviously, but the animal soul is all about, the lower drives and lower temptations, and maybe pulling a person into a negative space. And that's already a bit of a different type of experience. Maybe that doesn't have eternality on that level. That's what at least I almost want to believe. Now, let's take a look. So let's keep on going with this. So text 2. So we're starting off by saying
There's a question.
Sorry?
I think somebody has his hand.
Oh, hey, David, jump in.
Hey, we can move on if you need to.
No, go.
So it's hard for me to put this into words, but does the Zohar or any of the Kabbalistic sources talk about what force connects the soul and the body? In other words, is it like a magnetic force? I mean, that's my word for it. But is there some? Are they connected because God makes them connected, or is there some sort of bond there that keeps them together?
You're asking a great question that is directly discussed in Kabbalah. Jewish liturgy calls it mafli lasot. Mafli lasot. It's in the prayers in the morning. It's like the wonder of human existence. It's called like the miracle of life. And we say a blessing in the morning. Blessed are you, God, Hamafli Lasot, who creates life in this wondrous fashion. What that really means is to bind. Look, you take a magnet, and that is a really good analogy. You take a magnet that is pushing away from each other, and somehow you fuse them together. That's gonna require some effort. And indeed, it's an energy that is transcendent of both body and soul, that keeps body and soul together. Obviously, on a physical level, there's what we do to keep body and soul together. Eating and drinking, like the physical stuff that we do to keep ourselves alive. But on a spiritual level, it is a divine power that transcends both body and soul, that keeps the two together per divine will. At the same time, Kabbalah says that at some point, the soul recognizes that even though it, by its own nature, would wish to disappear, sorry, that's a spirit, would wish to depart from the body, its mission is to be with the body. So the example that's used is like a candle. The flame is always flickering, and it always flickers up, right? Even if you turn a candle to its side, the flame is always pointing up. And the reason is it's almost like a physical analogy or a physical symbol of the soul. And the soul always is, by its nature, is always trending upward, i.e., not physically, but trending back to its source. It's the wick that kind of keeps it tethered. But in this case, there's also a sense, a deep sense from the flame that despite what I want, there's something that I am wanted for. It's not just about me. Famous story in the Torah about the sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, who desired that closeness to God, who brought the foreign fire, who brought an offering that wasn't requested of them, and they lost their lives. And the way Kabbalah explains that, the Ar HaChaim HaKadosh, one of the commentators in Torah, who was a mystic, he explains that it's in the commentaries. He says that what happened was their souls got so excited on the day that the Mishkan, the tabernacle, opened. Their souls got so excited about closeness to God that the body could no longer hold them back. There was such a spiritual ecstasy, as it were, that physically, like it was just the tug was too powerful. So typically, there is this overriding force that keeps soul and body tethered, but it's possible. It says tzaddikim and other very special holy people. There is a danger of the soul actually getting too excited and then and that magnetic pull no longer working. Who was it? Was it the Baal Shem Tov or the Alter Rebbe would say a mimer, would say a Chassidic discourse, and then immediately like eat a bagel or something, like to tether it back, like to ground the experience, because otherwise the Rebbe also, when he said a mimer, Chassidic discourse, not a sikha. The Rebbe, when he spoke, there was two things. A sikha was like but a talk, and then a mimer was like a Chassidic discourse, the special tune, and the Rebbe closed his eyes. You could do something very special. And under the table, he was always holding on to a like a handkerchief, like something physical. And the understanding is that when you're operating in that space of spiritual connection, inspiration, you gotta ground it sometimes to hold on so that it doesn't skip out from the bodily tether. Second, okay. Okay, so I hope that answers the question, but it's a good question. Now, so let's talk about the soul's journey. Okay, the soul's journey. So what's important to focus on now in the second stage of the experience of passing is the understanding that the soul appreciates and has appreciated its connection with the body, and its separation is therefore difficult and on some level even painful, and therefore the soul remains in proximity. As much as one can use the word proximity to a spiritual entity, the soul remains in proximity to the body even after its uncoupling. This is very important. Even after its separation from the body, the soul remains in proximity for various spans of time. And there are different time segments stated in both the Talmud, the Gemara, which is not a Kabbalistic work, but the Gemara talks about this. And then Kabbalah speaks about this, spans of 3 days, 7 days, 30 days, and 1 year. Now, these may sound familiar, these segments of time may sound familiar, but take a look at what it's like for the soul, for the first 3 days, first 7 days, first 30 days, and for the first year. So I'm going to pull this back up on the screen so everyone online can see it as well, in case you don't have your PDF open. So text number 3. And I'm going to go through a number of texts. Here we go. Number 1 from the Jerusalem Talmud. For 3 days, the page marked 49. For 3 days, the soul hovers above the body, thinking that it can return to it. After 3 days, when it sees that the body's face has changed, it leaves the body and departs. Lest you think that now that it departs, it's departed altogether. We have the next text, the Zohar. The Zohar says, this is text 4a, for 7 days. For 7 days, the soul goes from the house where it lived to the grave, and from the grave back to the house, and it mourns its body. After 7 days, the body is subjected to its fate, and the soul ascends to its place. And so you might think, well, after,
So the 3 days, and then obviously 7 days is like Shiva. But like in Israel, they bury you the day you die. They bury you immediately. So does it not matter when the body's actually buried?
yeah, so I'm trying to repeat it because make sure everyone hears it. So the question is, what are these 3 days? Is that assuming that it takes 3 days to bury the deceased? What if you bury it right away? Is there still a 3-day period? And where do we find that 3-day period? I'm just going to put little words, but like, where do we find this 3-day period in halacha? Is there like that's Shiva? Is the Shiva? What's the 3 days? There's the burial, and there's the Shiva. Like, what's the 3 days? We'll see soon in halacha. There is a segment of 3 days as well. It doesn't necessarily have any pragmatic customs to it, but there is a not a segment. There is a
Like I know between the passing and the burial, there's halachic laws. you have
Right.
to follow.
yeah. So there's not. So we don't necessarily have a lot of practical halachas for the first 3 days, but there is a segment in time. There is a thing for 3 days, which we'll see soon. But it says for the soul, there is a very strong attachment to the point that it says for the first 3 days, the soul almost wants to somehow find a way back in. That's how much it. I don't know if the right word is misses or is pained by its disconnect from the body, but it literally says in the Talmud, it's looking to some way, some angle back in. Then for the 7 days, which would really mean from day 4 to 7, it's a little bit different. It's going back and forth. Clearly, it's still trying to be, but it's not necessarily trying to go back inside yet.
You said the soul stayed for 3 days, is that?
Interesting. Good. That's a very good question. Okay, let me repeat the question. When we say that the soul is hovering or wanting to go back, is that nefesh, ruach, neshama? What are we talking about? It's a very good question. I can speculate, but without seeing it in the source, I do not want to give a definitive answer. I would have to look that up. So let's see, maybe it'll come clearer as we see the text, but offhand, I'm not sure. My intuition is that it's more than just the nefesh, because the nefesh is there anyway. And when we say it departs, the nefesh never departs. So we're probably talking about the part that otherwise would go to Gan Eden, but is now still there when it's not usually there. So it's likely beyond the nefesh. Ruach and even neshama are the ones that are for the first segments in time are still there. Now let's continue with text 4b. And here we have another,
Question. What does it mean? After 7 days, the body is subjected to its fate.
My understanding of that is that these are various stages in the body's returning to the earth. And as the body becomes less familiar, not only less familiar, becomes more of the earth, then the soul also, it's kind of like moving commensurately away from each other. Text 4b, you have 30 days. For 30 days, says another source in the Zohar. Second, for 30 days, the soul and the body are judged as one, and thus the soul is located down here on earth. After that, after the 30 days, the soul ascends while the body erodes in the earth. So again, each text almost seems like after 3 days, the soul is gone. Nope. After 7 days, the soul is gone. Nope. After 30 days, the soul is, well, not that either. Text 4c, here's the Talmud again. This is the Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Shabbat, says the following: for 12 months, the body still exists, and the soul ascends and descends. After 12 months, the body becomes null. The soul rises and no longer returns. Well, we know that that's also not true. It doesn't rise and no longer return, but it means, so the question is, well, which one is it? Is it 3 days, 7 days, 30 days, 12 months? By now, I'm sure you know the answer. The answer is it's all of the above. And if you look very carefully, and I don't necessarily want to read these texts again, but if you look very carefully, each text speaks to a lesser degree of soul presence, right, with the body. In other words, these all represent stages in which and during which the soul segues away, or slowly segues away from the body. The first 3 days, the soul is most closely connected / wanting to return. The 7 days, a little bit less. The 30 days, a little bit less. After 12 months, a little bit less. Not that the soul doesn't appreciate or value the body and that the experience that it had not that it turns back and moves on, as it were, but it is more comfortable in its new unembodied state, and thus it's more comfortable in its current reality and less yearns and pines for its previous reality inside a body. So these are the stages. And it all speaks to the process, a process of the soul letting go of the body, which speaks to the soul's appreciation of what it had in a body. It's not like the soul that initially didn't want to come down says, see you later. I don't want to be here anyway. I'm out. Bye. Like, don't call again. Like, I don't want to have anything to do with you. That's not what's happening. The soul appreciates its time here on earth, its time in a body. It appreciates it to the point that literally, number one, the Zohar says is painful. And number two, it takes time, physical time, for the soul to move more and more and more away and become more comfortable with its new reality of not being inside a body, even though that's its original reality, but it's appreciated so much, the reality with the body, that takes some time. And here's where Jewish law and Jewish, I don't know if it's just law, Jewish perspective is just so just incredibly touching. Because as you and I know, we also have these segments in time. We, and I say we, I mean the mourners, the ones who remain souls and bodies on earth after a loved one passes away. We also have these moments in time. Now, the three I mentioned, we'll talk about that soon. But certainly we have the Shiva, the Shloshim, the 12 months. We have the 7 days, the 30 days, the 1 year, the yard site, etc. And what's amazing is that seen through this perspective of, we just said, I just want to put a few things together and maybe share something that you haven't thought about, or that typically is not spoken about. And that is that the experience of of us mourning the loss of a loved one, it's not just our pain that we're feeling. If you think about it in a little bit more subtle terms, there's an empathy that's happening. We are feeling not just our loss, but we're also feeling the experience of the soul of our loved one. And as it becomes more comfortable, as the soul becomes more comfortable, we also, I don't know if comfortable is the right term. As the soul accepts its reality more and more as time goes on, we also may, on an empathetic level, mirror that in our own experience here. Let's read this. Let's read the halachic differentiation, or the halachic segments in time that perfectly mirror this. What I'm really suggesting, let me just say this maybe a little bit clearer, because I don't know if what I'm saying is clear. What I'm suggesting is that what we know as halacha of mourning, the laws of mourning, they didn't just come randomly or in a vacuum, or not even, they're not just reflecting human reality and how we grieve and mourn. They're also reflective of the experience of the one whom we are mourning. And as the soul slowly becomes more integrated in its new space and its new reality, we also can perhaps become more integrated in that space, knowing with comfort that it is more comfortable with its new found reality. Let's take a look at how Jewish law literally mirrors this perfectly, and it's incredible. Here's from Maimonides, text number 5, Rambam, the laws of mourning. He writes the following: mourners observe 3 days of weeping, 7 days of eulogies, and for 30 days, restrictions on haircuts and wearing freshly ironed clothing, marrying, joining a celebration of friends, and traveling on business. The next text number 6, it's from the Code of Jewish Law. The Code of Jewish Law tells us if you encounter an acquaintance within 30 days of that person having lost and next of kin offer words of consolation and avoid the customary pleasantries. If 30 days have elapsed since the relative's passing, greet your acquaintance in the usual manner and offer indirect words of consolation. Avoid mentioning the deceased by name and extend the generic consolation, such as may you be comforted. If your acquaintance is mourning the loss of a parent, you should offer direct messages of comfort for the first 12 months, and only after that scale it back to indirect consolation. Truth is, I don't know. I mean, like that's some advice from the Code of Jewish Law. I don't know that it's relevant to jump into that and to pull that apart. I think the point of that text is simply that there is a segment of time of 12 months that demarcates some measure of mourning up until 12 months. There's one status of mourning after 12 months, a halachic different status of mourning, and the previous text talked about 3 days, 7 days, and 30 days. And so we have here literally the same segments of time: 3 days, 7 days, 30 days, 12 months, and it mirrors the experience of the soul, which once again, I know it's the third time I'm saying this, but I'm hoping it's making sense. I hope I'm conveying this effectively, is that when what we are feeling is not just our feelings, we're also feeling the feelings of our loved one. It's our connection with our loved one that is almost evoking our own sense. As they are pained, as it were, we are pained. And as they become less pained, then perhaps we may also be less pained. I'm not trying to minimize the pain. I'm just saying that halacha is almost, I don't know what the right word is, elegant or compassionate or truthful or reflective or considerate, or just, it's and all of the above, of the reality of what the soul is going through. And thus, as the soul goes on its journey, we go on our journey as well, we the mourners and the grievers, and it's a compatible experience. And so all of this, once again, speaks to the connection. You know, if our class title, which it is, and the class theme is soul connections, are we still connected? Then I think in the literal halachas and literal laws, Jewish law, Jewish practice, Jewish tradition of mourning, we find a soul connection. Our mourning reflects the experience of the soul, and the experience of the soul reflects its connection with us, because it's not just about the body, it's also about its loved ones. It's about it's missing its experience on earth. And so what's important to recognize is that this is not about moving on or moving past or moving forward. This is about understanding that there is a journey of the soul, that the soul has a journey that we have below, and these two experiences are really mirroring each other. And thus, once again, we see a soul connection that remains long after what we traditionally call as death.
Rabbi?
Yes, David.
Do these different time periods mean that for lack of a better term, the place that the soul goes is in a time-bound dimension? You know, in other words, it doesn't go beyond to space, to a place beyond space and time?
It's an excellent question. It's a question that I often wonder also. You know, it says we don't believe that spiritual dimensions are subject necessarily to time and space, the same limitations that we have. And yet it talks about 3 days, 7 days, 12 months, 30 days, 12 months. So what's going on? Like, is that our experience of time? Does the soul experience that? I'm restating your question. I know that. I wonder that also. It sounds like on some level, the soul is also experiencing what it experiences, somehow tethered to moments in time, even though it sounds a little bit strange that the soul, you know, in a space that's beyond time would somehow be still tethered. But maybe it's just the way we perceive it, or maybe there is some sort of element of time. The truth is, I don't know. And it's a question that I wonder about, but it does seem to say that it's tethered.
Rabbi,
Yes. Hi, Ray.
so aren't there some times where we like aren't having a shiva, we aren't because of some holidays, the times are cut shorter, like right before Shavuos? I remember Rabbi told me there's no, because it was a few hours before Shiva, before Shavuos.
Yeah. Ray, I'll explain just to make sure everyone's on the same page with your question. You're asking a good question or making a good point, which is that sometimes Jewish law will essentially wipe out Shiva, the 7-day mourning period. If a Yom Tiv, a holiday, a major holiday, comes, interrupts Shiva, then you don't revert back to Shiva. And I would say that there are other answers that are given as to why that happens, and the answers that may or may not be resonant to the mourners who feel like maybe they were, I don't know what the right term is, robbed of the opportunity to have a full Shiva, which is very cathartic in its own right, or can be cathartic in its own right. And many answers have been given. I think that the answer according to Kabbalah is very powerful, because that's what I'm sharing tonight. And that is, if we believe that the soul has, and that our experience is mirroring the soul's experience, then what that would stand to mean is that when there is a holiday and the soul also has that experience of the energy of that, the soul, that allows the soul to become more comfortable quicker with its reality, and thus our experience again is mirroring that. And so it's almost like, and not to sound in a way that's, I'm trying to, the intention here is not to sound, don't make it about you. It's all about them. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that there is part of our emotional experience that is not just about how we feel, but how we imagine our loved one to be feeling. It's not just us. It's not just us. And if we believe that a holiday, that a Yom Tiv, is something that affects all of reality, which we do, all of creation, not just we observe a holiday by, eating cheesecake and hearing the 10 Commandments like Shavuos, but we believe that a holiday is experience a moment in time in which there's a divine light that's unleashed, and that it's unleashed throughout the entire cosmos, higher and lower realms. And that means that the soul of our loved one is also experiencing that boost, and thus it helps it on its journey. Then that stands to reason that we'll also be helped in our journey. And I don't know if that perspective is in any way emotionally resonant or soothing. And I don't know that I'm trying to make it sound better or feel better. I don't know I don't know that I can do that with anything that I'm saying, but I do think that there is a truth to that, at least from this perspective. Now, how we feel about that's another thing, but I think there's something about that. But it is certainly a good point to mention that Shiva is not always Shiva. You don't always have 7 days, and it's possible that it's cut short, and there's situations and sometimes, and it happens that it's cut very short. And some people have really no Shiva.
Right.
I have no experience of Shiva. I just want to highlight this point, because this is really, it's really a very powerful. Text 7, a story from the Talmud. Before we do text 7, I just want to explain a little bit. We all know that there's a custom that after a loved one passes away, so the community, friends, and community comes out, and we go to the house. And I think we know now why, because if you look back at the text from the Zohar, it says that for 7 days the soul goes from the house where it lived to the grave, and from the grave back to the house, which means that it's not just about the family members are there in the house, so where else are you going to go? But it's because, again, the neshama, the soul, and I think we can safely say that it's not just the nefesh at this point, that it's the higher dimension of the soul also, that are literally around the house. And this leads to the Talmud. We're going to read it inside. The Talmud goes back, 1,800 years, 1,600 years? It's an ancient text, or an old text. Imagine if a person passed away, and imagine they had no next of kin. I had no family. Would there be any reason to observe Shiva, people to come over and make a minyan in the house? You would think, what's the point? There's no relatives that you're comforting.
Does anyone see Kaddish?
Well, yeah, I mean, the community would appoint someone to say Kaddish. Right, but maybe just do it in the shul, because who are you going? Who's in the house? There's no one in the house. Says text 7, you still go to the house. If a person dies, hold on one second, let me pull this up, sorry. Very powerful text. I mean, this whole class tonight, I don't know, I can only speak for myself. It's just very, very powerful. If a person dies and leaves no next of kin to be comforted, 10 people should go and sit in the deceased home. You see that? Yeah, a minion should still go and sit Shiva for them. And the question, obvious question is, why? If you think about this in very pragmatic terms, which I think most of us obviously would, we say Shiva is intended for the bereaved, for the mourners, for the family. Because you want to be with family, you want to comfort family. But if there's no family, why would you go to the house? Just go to shul, someone say Kaddish, and you mention the name and whatever. Why go to the house? A man, so the Talmud continues. Now, the Gemara doesn't give the reason. It just says, this is halacha. This is what you do. We know the reason from a spiritual perspective. Because the neshama is there. Shiva is not just about comforting.
Right.
The mourners, the human being mourners, it's also comforting the neshama, the soul, who's also going through a difficult moment. Or a transitioning moment. Let's continue. A man died in Rabbi Yehuda's neighborhood. As there were no mourners to be comforted, Rabbi Yehuda assembled a minion, 10 people every day, and they sat in the deceased's home. After 7 days after the Shiva, the dead man appeared to Rabbi Yehuda in a dream and said, "May your mind be at rest, for you have set my mind at rest." Look at that. It's unbelievable. And again, you think about like, okay, well, maybe just Kabbalah speaks about this. Not just Kabbalah. This is the Gemara. This is the Talmud, right? Tractate Shabbat. Now you're wondering, what does it do with Shabbat? The answer is, I don't even know. But the Talmudic tractates aren't always on theme, consistently. Sometimes you have other information in there. It's a very powerful idea. Yeah.
This is a little off topic, but the 5 levels of the soul. If you have a more advanced soul, does it have sort of, I don't know if there's different quantities of it, but does it have like a higher level of the higher levels of the soul?
Okay, so I'll just repeat. Question now is about going back to the 5 layers of the soul. Do we say that more advanced souls have higher level of these levels or more advanced levels of these levels? I think that's a good question. I've never thought of it, and I've never encountered anything that says precisely that. There are sources in Kabbalah that speak about different levels of soul, and typically it talks about where the soul comes from. It's not a static space. All souls come from, this manufacturing plant, not actual, but like from one static dimension. Souls can come from multiple dimensions, spiritual dimensions. And that's typically the explanation given as to more sensitive souls, more spiritual souls. I guess maybe that's maybe that's the same thing. Maybe if the soul is coming from a specific dimension, so it's got more ruach, or it's got more neshama, or it's got not more, but it's maybe amped up or tweaked in a certain way. Because clearly what we know is that even though every soul is divine, every soul is godly, every soul gives life, whatever, but every soul is different. Just like every person is different, every soul is different. Souls, when you think about personality, I kind of alluded to this before, but I didn't say it clear. You think about a person's personality, like them, right? Like who they are, right? The person, their personality. Where does it come from? It doesn't come from the body. Body has a personality. Since when does a body have a personality? It's the soul that it's the spirit. I think I kind of said this before, but I think it's an opportunity to kind of re-emphasize it. It's the soul that has a personality, and every soul has a different personality. So I guess it makes sense. Stronger personality. Oh, okay. Got it. I'm okay, good. Okay. Now we're ready for okay, we got some time. A little bit of time. We're now ready for the body's journey. We talked about the soul, talked about the experience of the soul. We talked about the journey of the soul. I mean, as it journeys away from the body, as it were. What about the body itself? There's a lot of text that we have now in the next few pages. We're not going to have time to read all the text. I feel like I should probably just tell you the main point, and then we'll do some of the text. The main point is that from a Jewish perspective, this is very important. The main point is very important, and that is that a body that has housed a soul, that body, even after the soul has untethered from it, remains sacred and holy and pure and kadosh. I don't know another way to say it, kadosh. And the analogy, and there are texts that speak to this, we'll see how much we can get in, reading, you can certainly read it, on your own. It's likened to a Torah scroll. So if you think about it, and maybe we never thought about it this way, like we all know that a Torah scroll is holy. You can't just take out a scroll. You can't just willy-nilly use it for whatever. It's holy, right? It's a Sefer Torah is holy. So when you think about that, so ask yourself the following question: what makes it holy? I mean, it's parchment. How's the letters? Oh, it's the letters, the script. It's a piece of parchment is not holy. The letters written on the parchment. So now ask the following question: well, what if it's no longer kosher? What if the letters are no longer kosher? What if the letters no longer form the actual script of Torah? Can you then take the parchment and discard it? Of course not. To bury it. In other words, even after, or even when a Torah is no longer fit for use, as it were, in other words, you can't read it from it publicly, it's not kosher, because the letters aren't there completely, and it's not perfectly. The parchment forever remains, the parchment itself, the scroll itself remains forever holy, eternally holy. And if God forbid, text 8a, if God forbid, if God forbid a Torah scroll is burned, you rip kriya. You know what kriya is? You rend your garment, just like when a person passes away. It's the same idea. There's a strong in halacha, and this is from the Talmud again, text 8a. I'm not reading it inside. Let me just pull this up here one second. I'm going to reference text. I don't know that I'm going to read them, but you can certainly read them as I talk. There's this strong parallel in halacha the Talmud makes between a person and a Torah scroll, and the parallels are very pronounced. And text 8b also speaks about this, right? The Ramban Nachmanides makes this correlation between the parchment. Parchment is to the text of Torah as a body is to the soul. That's the parallel, right? Parchment, body, letters, soul. It's the soul, it's the letters that make the Torah, that make life. But it requires parchment, it requires a body. And it's not just a glove. You think of a glove, I'm done with the job. I can throw it out, get another glove. Hey, it's just a garment. I could switch it out. It's not that important. No. A Torah scroll's garment, the parchment, remains forever holy. You can't just throw it out. It's not yours to discard it. Even paper, forget a Torah scroll. Even pages of Torah, we put in the Geniza, right? In the Shems, we put in the Geniza. We bury instead of discarding. Let alone a Torah scroll. The same is true with the body. The point of this is, again, not to lose the force from shoes or whatever the expression is. It's to remain focused on this. The point is that we talked about the experience of the soul. What about the body? The body.
You cover the body.
Sorry?
Right?
Cover. Yeah. We'll talk about that soon. We'll talk about that in a second. The body remains kadosh. And therefore, that's a perfect segue, right? And therefore requires very specific care to maintain its holiness and dignity. And I'll just ask the question: has anyone been on a Chevra Kadisha? No. Chevra Kadisha, of course, is the Jewish Burial Society, for men, women. For women, also to protect the dignity of the body. I'm just trying to make sure that the emphasis is clear. When we talk about the care for the body, it's not nostalgic. It's not whatever. It's literally holy. It's kadosh. It's holy. You say, but the soul is life. The body is just a spacesuit. The body is just the glove. No. That's what we might have thought based on what we previously said. But we're adding a new dimension here. The body retains its holiness even after the soul departs.
No, the soul is a piece of Hashem.
Correct.
So just like the Torah holds a Hashem.
Oh, right. I'll mention that. Right. The soul is a piece of Hashem. The letters of Torah, God's name, are obviously God's names. And that infuses what it touches. It infuses it. It transforms into holiness. And therefore, for example, so I'll give you 6 things that Chevra Kadisha are careful. Number one, the body in general is always handled with dignity and respect. As Ray mentioned, it's covered. The body, well, I actually talk about covered in a second. The body, when it's clean, when it's prepared for burials, is gently cleansed and dressed in shrouds in a respectful way. The body is always covered. This is what Ray mentioned a moment ago. Even while being cleaned, it's covered, it remains covered. Number four, the body is never placed face down. You never flip over, you never turn over, you never put a body face down. Listen, you're not allowed to speak casual conversation in the presence of the deceased, of the body. And the body is never left alone. We know the importance of a shomer, exactly, of a shomer, of someone that's around. Text number 10. I think we'll read this one. I think it's important to read text 10 at least.
Is a shomer for the soul?
You think it's for the soul, but it's also for the body. The body should not be left alone. The body also should not be left alone. Take a look at text number 10. That's the whole point of text 10. You think typically that the shomer is for the soul. It's in proximity to the body. It no longer has a space. It's not yet laid to rest. The soul is it doesn't know what to do with itself. It can't leave. The body's still here. It can't go back in. It's trying to. We read before. What's it going to do? So at least you're there reading Tehillim. No. Also, but not only. Text 10. We are required to maintain constant watch over a corpse even during the day. I don't even like that term, but the body even during the daytime, and even if there's no cause to suspect that something can happen to the body. It's not like we're afraid that something is going to happen to the body. The body snatches. No, this is to be there, just to be there. Those who maintain watch are actively performing a mitzvah to the extent that they are meanwhile absolved from many other mitzvahs, such as reading the Shema and reciting the prayers at the appropriate times. So we have a general rule. If you're dealing with a mitzvah, in other words, if you're actively engaged in the performance of a mitzvah, then what? You don't have to, there are many other mitzvahs that you don't have to engage in, and this is one of them. Let's continue. We maintain a watch over the deceased out of respect. For if we were to leave the body alone, it would appear as if we have abandoned it like a utensil that we no longer require. This indicates that the issue, that the care and the love and the concern and the dignity is not just about the soul, it's about the body. If we were to abandon the body, we'd say, oh, the only valuable thing here was the soul. The body, just a spacesuit, just a glove, like a utensil. I don't need it anymore. That's an old glove. I don't need it. I tossed it. I discarded it. I don't need it. It's in the garbage. God forbid. God forbid. We treat the body with respect and dignity, and part of that is the shomer. We're at the time, so I'm just going to be very quick for the next few things. This, of course, leads into a discussion and a conversation that we could have, that we're not going to have tonight, in text number, 11 is the same theme, text 12 and text 13 and text 14, about the mitzvah of burial, laying a body to rest. The idea here is, and it's an important idea, and it's a critical idea, and I wish we had more time, and I would focus on the idea, but just suffice it to say that there's texts in scripture that talk about the importance of laying a body to rest and burying the body. And if we think about it in the context of the soul and the soul's experience, you can imagine it would be a little bit traumatic for the soul to see its precious body be essentially destroyed. That's something that would be not only disrespectful to the body, but also painful for the soul. And the objective here is to respect the body and to respect the soul and to respect its experience and not to be callous about the experience. And so, of course, in Judaism, of course, in Jewish tradition, the body is laid to rest, to return to the earth, and allowing the soul to see it be treated respectfully and have an opportunity for the soul to take solace, to take comfort in the fact that the body has been taken care of in a respectful fashion. I want to end with one point, the final point of tonight. That is what happens after. What happens after, the funeral? What happens after the body is laid to rest and the soul begins its journey, or continues its journey away from the body and becoming more comfortable in its current status. And the one thing I want to focus on and mention is there is a tradition to visit our loved ones in the cemetery. In other words, to visit and Jason, you literally last week, you did that. And in fact, and the reason for this is, which we'll talk about, we're going to have to talk about this. I just need another 2 minutes. Because I said before, we dropped this all the way at the beginning of the class. The nefesh always remains with the body. It never goes anywhere else. It's there where the body is laid to rest. The nefesh is always there. When we visit the body, when we visit the gravesite, the cemetery, we literally stir or interact with, we summon, as it were, or connect with the nefesh, and the nefesh in turn summons the ruach. And this is not you and I making up stuff. This is straight up in the sources. And I'm going to read a text or two here that speak to this point.
16.
It's text 16. Here we go. The nefesh remains, what page is that?
66.
Okay. 66. The nefesh remains present in the grave. Due to the fact that it remains among the living, it is acquainted with their pain. That could be a whole class. Does a loved one know what's going on? Literally just answer that question. And by the way, you're thinking, yeah, but how do I know that this source is legit? Just look where the source comes from. Read it for yourself. This is the Zohar. There's no other more legitimate Jewish spiritual source than the Zohar. Spiritual, I say Jewish mystical source. This is the Zohar. Zohar HaKadosh, the Holy Zohar. And it says that the nefesh remains in the grave. And since it's among the living, i.e., it's on earth, it's within the earth, it's not in Gan Eden, it's of the earth, right? Amongst us, it's acquainted with our pain. At the time of their need, the nefesh, pleads with God for mercy on their behalf. When the inhabitants of the world are in need, when they are in sorrow and visit the cemetery, the nefesh is aroused to their plight. It ascends and awakens the ruach, which in turn entreats God for mercy. Consequently, the Holy One, blessed be He, has mercy on the world. My understanding that there are other sources that say that the whole chain is triggered. The nefesh calls the ruach calls the neshama calls the chaya calls the yechid, and yechid is already there. Yechida means unified with God. And it triggers, and it calls, and it advocates, and it prays, and it brings down the blessings that we need. And I want to end with a text that speaks to this, text 17, which speaks about visiting cemeteries. And before I read 17, we're going to close out with 17. I do want to mention there are some times that traditionally we visit the cemetery. Number one, on the yard site. And number two, maybe only two times. More, anytime is fine. But yard site specifically, and the month of Elul, preceding, it's close, right? Preceding the high holidays. There's a Jewish tradition to visit. I think Rabbi New every year, right, does a service by the cemetery, by the Jewish right, in the cemetery. Press line, yeah. And it's very powerful. Because what more appropriate time of year to pray and to evoke, to get everyone, to get all of our loved ones kind of, rattling the cages, as it were, above, to evoke what we need than this time of year. When I say this time, because we're basically there. There was once a community, text 17, that wished to relocate. That means the community itself, right, that wished to relocate. One of the deceased, this is from 1,000 years ago, this text, 800 years or 900 years ago. Once a community that wished to relocate, one of the deceased buried in the vicinity appeared in a dream to a member of the community and pleaded, "Please do not abandon us. We appreciate your visits to our cemetery." Barzillai, the Gileadite, declared in Samuel, which is scripture, which goes back now 3,000 years, "I would like to die in my own city." He wished for this because the deceased appreciate when their loved ones visit their graves and request goodness for their souls. This improves their condition in heaven. And when we pray on behalf of the deceased, they pray for us in turn. Are we connected? I asked at the beginning of this class. Are we connected with those who have passed on? What is the connection like? How does that work? Are we connected with them? Are they with us? Do we know what's that? Do they know what we're going through? Do they care? Do they still want to know us? And I think today, can't put all the pieces together now. We're out of time. I think we put together all the pieces. We got a very comprehensive view of the Jewish perspective on what happens when the soul departs from the body. Number one, it remains connected. The nefesh stays by the grave. The ruach is Gan Eden. The neshama is in upper Gan Eden. But the bottom line is it remains connected. The experience of the soul segueing away from the body is mirrored by our almost empathetic response in the way we mourn loss and we feel the love. Oh, I skipped the beginning. We said the Alter Rebbe said that the communication that we have, or the connection, is through love. Love is the only channel. You don't need a phone number. You don't need to call. You don't need to write. You don't need to visit in person. We talked about visiting in person just now, but the way to connect is through the love the recalling and the love that we have for our loved ones. We spoke about the power of treating treating the body with respect, not just the soul. It's not just the soul that's precious because it is the life, but the body that was enlivened, the body that took part in the soul's mission, that body is precious as well, and thus it requires our dignity. And then, of course, we ended with some text about the power of showing up and visiting and being there. And when we're there for them, it's not contingent, but we are there for them. They're there for us, and the connection remains. So, are we connected? The answer is yes. It's a resounding yes, and it requires more effort. It requires a specific type of effort and more effort. And it may seem maybe for some of us sometimes daunting, or maybe it seems I don't know what it seems. I don't want to create impressions that are not there, but it's something that certainly is worthwhile to maintain because the love is still there and the connection is still there. So that concludes today's lesson. Thank you very much for joining. Next week's class is entitled The Morning After. We'll speak about grief and mourning from a Jewish perspective. Looking forward to seeing you then. All right. Thanks for coming out tonight. Bartia, despite the challenges with the parking and everything else, logistics, I'm glad we had a chance to talk about this topic. If you have questions or want to schmooze afterwards, I'm here. We can certainly do that. All right. Made sense? Make sense? Tonight made sense? All right, I'm just checking in.
I have a question.
Yes, Marcy.
You mentioned that there are 5 parts of the soul and that they go to different places. Not right.
Hold on, Marcy, 1 second. So we'll just get you on Zoom. Right.
Thank you.
Sorry, Marcy, continue?
So you were saying that the parts of the soul go to different places.
Yes.
When, and I'm assuming you are reincarnated.
Oh, good question. Wow, great question. Great question. Okay, so the question is about. Oh no, let's go to this. I wasn't saying.
No.
Okay. Reincarnation. So the core question that you're asking is, well, 1 second. If the soul finds some sort of rest or space in Gan Eden, so then what happens with reincarnation? Then it's pulled out of that and it's dropped in another body. So it doesn't have that experience. It's now back in a body and it's now going through, like, what's going on with that? The short answer is Judaism does believe in reincarnation, but in a very, very different form of reincarnation than does Eastern philosophy, where the soul, great to see you, where the soul, those beliefs have it that the soul, thank you, that the soul is recycled in different bodies and just has different experiences. Pleasure. Good to see you, Toba. This is a very different understanding. And in short, Judaism both believes in reincarnation and also believes that the soul remains at rest and is not pulled, schlepped back, and popped back into a body. How are those two compatible? Lesson 5, we'll talk about that. So we're going to talk about lesson 5.
Rabbi.
Whole lesson. Yes, Ray.
Does the soul recognize? Would my husband's soul recognize my soul? Would my soul recognize his soul?
100%. If you think of soul on the level of ruach as personality, feeling, I mean, why would personality and feeling and that level disappear? That's not going anywhere. In other words, you recognize that it's on the contrary. That's the core that you recognize. Sometimes you can't recognize the physical person, but you can recognize their spirit. It's like, oh, wait a second. You hear someone talking, it's not just the physical voice, but like, well, that's very familiar, right? And that's even more recognizable. The answer is absolutely, because what defines us is not just the body. It's very hard sometimes to imagine that there can be this life and reality and connection and love and recognition without a body. Because what are we without a body? I think that's kind of where your question's coming from. And I can relate to that question in the sense that, yeah, it's a good question. It's like, wait, do we have anything left if we don't have a body? And I think the whole point of tonight and even last week is not only do we have something outside the body, we have everything outside, not to minimize the body, but like the core of who we are our core personality, our core identity, what makes us most uniquely us and most uniquely identifiable as us, what makes us beloved by the other, and what makes us love the other is not a body. It's the spirit. It's the spirit. It's the ruach. So that's just a long way to say the answer is yes.
So
Yes.
will he recognize by my red hair?
He'll recognize you by your personality, by your incredible personality. Because Ray, there's one thing about you, and that is you are unforgettable. That is for sure.
Oh dear. I don't know if that's good or bad.
No, only in a good way. That wasn't a loaded statement. No, I mean in a good way.
Rabbi,
Thank you, Rabbi.
It's so hard. No, I understand the question. It's so hard to imagine ourselves
Right.
as like spirits, and not body first, because we're so conditioned to start with body. But anyone that's ever been in a relationship knows that the first time you met a person, you notice certain things about their physical features, and then later on, it's like, oh, I don't even notice that, or that's total. Like, I'm not saying good, bad, or not. It's not positive. It's just at some point, like even like the physical just stops being, I don't know, like that. The relationship is so much beyond that, so much deeper and so much truer than just a body, and that's really what the idea here is.
Right.
Jason, do you want to?
No, you go, my quick question is.
Okay.
We at school?
Oh, tomorrow. You know what we do here?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be here with the yeshiva, because we have a yeshiva for the boys.
Okay. so-
Yeah, 12 o'clock here. Yeah, and I'd love to
Rabbi.
get your question about tonight, because
Okay.
we'll unpack more. I don't want to hear more about the trip. All right, we'll see you, Jason. Thank you for helping clean up over here. Appreciate
Rabbi.
it. Thanks. Yeah, yeah.
Lynn. Hi.
Hey, Lynn.
Hi.
Hey.
A real quick question. When
Sure.
wonderful things happened, simchas, all occasions, life and death, there is always a feeling within me that my husband is with me. That spirit belongs where we are. Is that just wishful thinking?
Based on what we learned tonight, it's not just wishful thinking. Based on what we learned tonight, it's a reality. It's the reality of our loved ones loving us, and the love doesn't go away. You know, it's kind of like, it's so interesting. I was just saying before that we're so conditioned to think in terms of body, even though we know really that we don't really feel in terms of body, like only externally, yes, but like deeply no. But yeah, we're so conditioned to think in terms of body that it's like, you know, on a body level, you know, if I don't see someone for a while, I can possibly forget them, right? If you haven't seen your best friend from high school in 40 years, in 50 years, yeah, when you see them again, you reconnect, you know, it all comes back, and, you know, it's like you picked up the conversation. But if you haven't seen them for a while, maybe you feel disconnected. But that's only because the ruach here on earth is say limited, is framed within a body, and if you don't see the body, then you may not feel the ruach. But whereas a ruach that's not a spirit, that's not it's not limited by a body, can experience a love and a connection that is literally as strong and as powerful as ever, without any diminishment whatsoever. So the answer is yes, of course, our loved ones are by our simchas. Absolutely. And they don't, you know,
And
like
frankly, this isn't a selfish way of thinking. I want them
no,
to have been able to
not selfish.
experience.
No, it's not at all. It's a true way of thinking. You know the Yiddish word faribel? I don't know if you're familiar. Faribel is like when you get into a little spat, I guess, as it were, with somebody, like faribel, like not, you know, sometimes a person doesn't get an invitation to a simcha. Now they're in a faribel. Now you didn't invite me, I'm not going to invite you to the simcha. People, like, it happens. Meanwhile, the first person, I don't know, it was an oversight. They sent it got lost in the mail, but it could be a general. Now it's the next 30 years. There's a faribel between the families because of a non-invitation.
Mhm.
You think a neshama, so a ruach above, needs an invitation? You think there's pettiness of, oh, I didn't get, and I'm not actually saying we send the physical invitation. What I'm suggesting is that the love is so strong, it's so pure. It's so, I guess that's the best word, pure.
Yeah.
That it's, of course they're there. Of course they're there. Say by a chasana, by a wedding. I mean, literally, one of the reasons for the circles is that we're drawing down the energy. We say, we try to verbally evoke also and mention some names of family members that are there in spirit. We literally believe that the generations that our loved ones are there by a wedding. And it's not just by a wedding, by any simcha. And it's not just by a simcha, it's always. I think it's one of these things that sometimes we say, nah, it's too good to be true. It's too good to be true. You're telling me that we still have a connection as strong, maybe even stronger. You're telling me that. It's too good to be true.
Thank you.
Sometimes it's true, and it's not too good to be true. It's just truth. It's truth, and it's not my truth. I'm not sharing. I mean, whenever I teach, my goal is never to tell you my opinion. It's only to tell you what the sources say. So tonight we learned literally Gemara, we learned Kabbalah, we learned from the most authentic and classic and traditional sources, from the Code of Jewish Law, from Rambam, Shulchan Aruch, all the classic Jewish texts, and hopefully put together a picture of what's what and what we believe in. And I think it's powerful, and I think it's, I think we've heard a lot of these things, but to put it together in a way that kind of comes together, I think is very powerful. And I appreciate the opportunity to discuss it with you. And Lynn, I'm glad that you got the email I sent you.
Thank you. I did. And
good.
the printed material, is it at Shul?
Yeah, well, yeah, I have the booklets printed each week. I
Okay.
print the booklet.
Okay.
So yeah, if
I'll
you want to
stop
pick
by.
one, yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Pleasure.
Rabbi, this is David again.
It
I was
is.
going to ask the same question about getting the printouts. I don't know if there's something I need to be doing or.
Yeah. Wait. Did you get? Are you getting the PDF or you didn't get the PDF?
You sent me the PDF in the chat last time, but I haven't gotten.
Oh, so I sent
Am I
it out.
supposed?
Okay. Well, I sent it
Is
out.
it attached to your emails or something?
Yeah, so I sent out an email, I want to say today maybe, that had the PDF attached to it. So if you didn't get that, let me know.
I'll look for it.
I actually sent you a separate, after I posted in the chat last week, I actually sent you specifically, because we were talking about it, an email with last week's PDF, and then I sent another one today. I sent to everybody the PDF. If for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe you went to spam or whatever, if for whatever reason you didn't get it and you need it, just text me or
I just
email
found
me.
it.
I
You
didn't
found
see
it.
the
Found
link.
it. Yeah,
Okay, good.
thank
Yeah.
you.
The textbooks,
Rabbi,
there were textbooks for this, but we don't have them in print. So we have just the PDFs right now.
I have to say, Rabbi, that this course and this class in particular it's amazing. I mean, it's really, I mean, it's I don't even know how to put it into words, but it's like, I feel like my neshama is dancing around and energetic and full of ideas, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you for sharing.
One last question, and I don't know if this is something I expect you to have an answer for, or maybe just think about it. We can talk about it later. But as you were talking about what happens with the body and the separation with the soul and the initial time periods and so forth, I started thinking about there's got to be a connection between that and why Kohens can't come in contact with the dead.
Mm.
And I was sitting there trying to figure out what could that be. Is it
Right.
just the pain that the soul and the body are in, that you don't want your priest to come in contact. I don't know. There's got to be a connection. There's got to be a connection.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think along those lines, I think your question evokes a question that I'm thinking of now, which is we typically associate a cemetery and, a gravesite with tumah, with ritual impurity. If we are thinking that the nefesh is alive there and well, and if we think about that the body is holy and retains its holiness even after passing, well, then wherein lies the impurity. And I guess my thought on that, and I'm just formulating it now, is that there's still an element of displacement. You know, even if the body is there in some form and the soul is there and the nefesh is there in some form, there's still some sort of displacement, which still is some form of separation, and therefore evokes some sort of spiritual pain as well. In addition to the benefits that we spoke about of visiting, there's still some sort of displacement there, and I think that there is a sense of, you know, on that level of maybe, yeah, I don't know, I guess that gets the core reason of why a priest, why a Kohen is prescribed from visiting this, you know, from being in contact with death. Yeah.
Anyway, my
So much
mind's in the process
yeah.
of being blown. So
There's
I'll
a
keep
lot to
thinking
think
about it.
a lot to think
Yeah.
about. I appreciate you sharing that it was meaningful, and I can speak for myself. It's very, very touching to be able to have the opportunity to on my own to study this and present it. And yeah, all real concepts. And of course, I'm thinking about my loved ones that I still try to maintain a connection with and visit the cemetery, and particularly I can speak about my grandfather, who I was very close with. And you know, somebody who I strive to think about on a regular basis and maintain that connection. So very special. Thank you. David, Sarah, great to see you.
Yeah.
Scott,
Have a great week, everybody.
pleasure. Sorry, did you have a
You
question?
too.
Want to jump into something?
Rabbi,
Yes.
one more question. Sorry. And this is something that I have been curious about now for 19 years when Mervyn, may he rest in peace, passed away. You said that the soul is in pain when it leaves the body. It's a painful situation. How does it, I remember so well the painful situation he was in at that point. Does the body feel the pain of the soul leaving it?
That's a very good question. I don't know. The short answer is I don't know if the body is aware of the soul is definitely aware of the body's pain. If the body is aware of the soul's pain, I don't know. I don't know if the body has that level of awareness on its own without the soul.
Okay, thank you.
That all may be the soul's awareness and experience.
The soul's awareness. Okay, thank you, sir.
But I
See you
think-
next week.
See you then. Sorry, did you want to jump in on something or no?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? You've given us so much. And maybe at another point we can maybe, I don't know if you're going to address the level of soul and how the Torah learning we do here on earth affects that in the world to come, you know, in the well,
We're
not
gonna-
just in the
Yeah.
in the and also the idea of I was curious about that, and also the idea of the soul's pieces going and recombining in different ways.
Right.
You know, that's always kind of blown my mind, the idea of, I've never really read enough about that, about how those soul pieces go, and then where does that one have rest, and this one is in some chamber.
Right. It is interesting that. So the latter point is indeed fascinating. You know, like if the soul is almost like split in different dimensions, you know, what is that like? You know, is that?
Oh, not the different dimensions. That's not what I meant. I'm so sorry. I meant when it recombines to come back into another.
Okay, got it.
So,
For you mean for reincarnation? Okay,
right.
so yeah, we'll talk about that at length. And there's a subtlety in Kabbalah and when it speaks about that I think is very important. And we're going to catch it. And I think it's going to answer, there's so many questions about reincarnation, and some of it, so much of it on a surface level really doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't like, there's a lot of gaps in the logic, like how does that actually work?
Right.
So in lesson 5, I think we're going to cover it very comprehensively. To your first point, we're going to speak about that next. I'm going to make sure to speak about that next week. About
great.
how what we do can help boost, elevate, aliyas and neshama, right? It can lift up the soul of. I mean, today we spoke about obviously the connection, but next week I'm gonna make sure to speak about how we can also benefit, be mizakeh, right? Be a benefit to our loved ones, and essentially give a gift.
because there can be like different, like really high neshamas that come down here, the soul itself is, or more coarse ones, but maybe the coarse one, how it affects the soul by what they
Right.
do here, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just curious.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about, but yeah, I believe next week we'll touch on that.
Great.
I'll
Okay,
make sure.
thank you so much, Yashikar.
Pleasure. Good night, everyone. We'll see you
Night.
guys.
Okay,
Lila,
bye-bye.
Good morning, Rabbi Sollish.
Eve, that's you. What
It took
time
me a
is
while.
it in Israel? Oh my gosh, it's gotta be.
4:30.
I saw you come in. I think I caught you right away when you entered, and I'm like, is that the Eve we know and love in Israel? You just got there a few days ago. Are you? Did you wake up? Did you not? Like, are you?
No, I was sleeping, and I guess Hashem wanted me to wake up to listen to you. Although it took me a while. My tablet, apparently I couldn't log in. It says I
Oh.
hadn't logged into emails in a year. But I got you on my phone. I finally just went to my cell phone, and
There you go.
so at around I guess it would have been 8:20 your time. I'll watch it. I'll watch it at the
I'll
end
send
of the
tomorrow.
week.
I'll send the full recording. Wow, it's so great to connect. It's crazy. Last week you were here. We spoke on Shabbos, Motzei Shabbos, and now you're in Israel. We're still technology. You gotta love it. Anyway, give my best to the family. Give my best to your husband
Well,
and to the whole mishpacha. And
yeah, he's sleeping.
okay, yeah, don't wake him up. But tell him when he wakes up. You give regards. But otherwise, I hope everything is good, and we'll see you soon.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very
All right.
much. And I did
See you.
get the email, obviously.
Yeah. Good. Okay, great. All right.
Take care. Be well. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Tov, Boker Tov. All right. Take care.
Yeah. Bye.